So welcome to Facing the Change, What the Loss of Federal Funding Means for Washington Libraries. I am joined by my colleagues at the Washington State Library, who will introduce themselves later in the presentation to talk about some of these issues that we are facing. I first want to describe the funding structure of the State Library to give some context to our presentation. The Washington State Library, like most state libraries, is funded in whole or in part by the Institute of Museum and Library Services, or IMLS, which is the only federal agency that supports libraries and museums. State libraries are also funded through the Library Services and Technologies Act, or LSTA, through the Grants to States program. IMLS also provides National Leadership Grants and Laura Bush 21st Century Grants. The IMLS operates on a budget of approximately $230 million, depending on the year and the federal budget, and approximately $180 million of this is allocated through the Grants to States program. Each state gets a base allocation of $1 million and then additional allocation based on a population formula. Washington receives approximately $3.9 million. Our state library is also funded through various state funding sources. And as you may know, the state's recently released budget is not particularly great given Washington's budget shortfall. There are still questions on how the state's budget is going to affect the remainder of the library and its services. So today we're going to be focusing primarily on federal funding and what that funding supports. So how did we get here? Beginning on March 14th, President Trump signed Executive Order 14238, continuing the reduction of federal bureaucracy, intended to dismantle the only federal agency dedicated to funding library services, IMLS, as well as 6 other organizations or agencies. But wait, didn't Congress just fund IMLS? Why, yes, they did. Also on March 14th, the Senate passed and the President signed a continuing resolution for fiscal year 2025, which provides funding for IMLS through September 2025. Although this continuing resolution provides funding for IMLS, President Trump has instead directed the agency's elimination on the same day. The executive order usurps the intent of Congress's decision to provide funding for IMLS, which President Trump agreed in signing that law. So how can an executive order be stopped or limited? An EO can be stopped or limited by Congress enacting a law that overrides the president's action. A court can overturn provisions of the executive order or actions taken to implement the executive order that it finds to violate the Constitution or federal law. President Trump or a future president could rescind or modify the executive order or direct that it be interpreted in ways to reduce the disruption of IMLS activities and programs. On April 2nd, the Washington State Library, along with California and the Connecticut State Library, received notices from the IMLS Acting Director, Keith Sonderling, authorizing the termination of federal grants administered by the Institute of Museum and Library Services effective April 1, 2025, in alignment with the agency's updated priorities and the President's Executive Order 14238, continuing the reduction of federal bureaucracy issued on March 14, 2025. So this was in response to our grants to state program, the $3.9 million that I mentioned. This grant is unfortunately inconsistent with IMLS's priorities. Independently and secondly, the President's March 14, 2025 executive order mandates that the IMLS eliminate all non-statutorily required activities and functions. But he did say that we wish you well at the end, so that was nice. On April 28th, the federally funded Washington State Library Department team, which is in part some of us that are here today, received letters informing us that our positions are at risk for layoffs. If we don't receive funding from IMLS, our last day working in our current positions will be June 27th.
That's okay.
This funding would only get us through fiscal year 2025, which ends on September 30th. So beyond June and beyond September are a mystery at this time. But whiplash, as of 3 p.m. yesterday, so about 17 or so hours ago, we received notice that the Washington State Library's LSTA FY25 grants to states funding was reinstated. This funding, again, would only be good through FY25 fiscal year, which ends on September 30th. And beyond September is still a mystery. And regardless of how this funding is going to shake out, the services that are federally funded are still very much in jeopardy. So what does this mean for Washington State? Well, there are a lot of programs that we federally fund with that LSTA money. Those programs are going to be in jeopardy. Access to eBooks, research databases, 24/7 reference help, digitized heritage materials, support for rural libraries, and tribal library support. Also, training and consulting, the Washington Talking Book and Braille Library, workforce development resources, and institutional library services. At this time, I would like to introduce my colleague, Jean Williams, to talk about eBooks and audiobooks, as well as research databases.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jean Williams. I'm the Public and Tribal Library Consultant at the Washington State Library. I've been here about a year and a half. So when talking about eBooks, we have a couple of different options. So the largest ebook consortium that we have is the Washington Digital Library Consortium, or the WDLC, and that serves 40 library systems across the state, medium down to very small libraries. And that consortium lends over 1 million ebooks and e-audiobooks annually. While this consortium is funded by the membership, we do have a cooperative projects librarian, Jude Guzzi, who spends about 20 hours a week of her time managing purchasing added copies for the collection. She manages turning in invoices. She manages the executive committee that manages the consortium. She handles their meetings, their reports. She does the budgeting. So her position is what is at risk. So that 20 hours a week of management is potentially in jeopardy. She also, when she does the invoicing, what that essentially means is that the Secretary of State's office is the fiscal agent for the digital consortium. So the Secretary of State's office invoices all of the member libraries. They hold that money, and then they pay the invoices out. So the fiscal management is another very important part, and that is a mystery as to what would happen to that. So currently the Executive Advisory Committee is working very hard with the state library to figure out how to move those activities over to the consortium. So while it's not in jeopardy of going completely away, it's in jeopardy of how it is managed, which would probably be added cost. There's also, in past years, the state library has put in up to around $50,000 a year to help boost the number of copies that the consortium could buy. The other option that the state library provides in ebooks is the Palace Project. And the Palace Project, we do have some member libraries that have their own Palace collections, but we also offer a free Palace card so that anyone in the state, geolocation based, can get access to that collection. So we're not sure what would happen to that collection if federal funding were to go away. We do own titles, we own perpetual titles in that, but we don't know how we might maintain access to it in the future. And then with I believe the next slide might be statewide databases. Yes. So the state library also negotiates the statewide database licenses, and currently that database product is provided by Cengage Gale. So our Gale databases, we also subsidize about half the cost of that. So that project we are already winding down. So the plan is that Gail, Cengage Gail will be reaching out to each library, school district, community college to negotiate a contract directly with that agency, and the federal funds coming from the state library will no longer subsidize those costs. Our hope is that most libraries can afford to take it on, but I'm sure there are some libraries and some school districts who may have trouble covering that funding. So that project is already being wound down, which is not great.
Thanks, Jean. So next, I'd like to invite Sarah Pate to talk about our 24/7 AskWA reference service.
Good morning, Sarah Pate. I've got about 3 projects here at the State Library, one of which is federally funded, and that's AskWA. So I'm the coordinator of the statewide virtual reference cooperative, which has about 40 member libraries, community and technical colleges, and as well as some other public and academic libraries across our state. I'm also the director of the Washington Center for the Book, and do the social media for the state library as well, as the weekly WSL updates newsletter. So in terms of AskWA, it is 100% federally funded through our side of things. We subsidize over half the cost of both the software and the 24/7 reference coverage that comes from the SpringShare Reference Library and Co-op. So right now that is funded through the end of September. So we'll definitely, members would still have access to the software and the co-op through that time period. And as of yesterday, we thought I would be employed until the end of June, but possibly to help support that. Now we're not sure what this means, finding out that our funding has come. And one thing to understand too about the IMLS funding is that it's a payback sort of thing. So the state library pays those costs in front and then gets a reimbursement, right? And so when we were told in April, hey, you're not getting that money anymore, this is for things we've already paid for. This is for like grants we've already granted. And so it's, it's kind of doubles the degree of disaster there. But so many things are still up in the air. I can still, maybe I'll be around longer than June because of this de-canceling of our current grant. But I would still say that, the project is still in huge danger because we don't know what happens after we get our already approved grant, that ends in September. Like, will we get any sort of funding going forward, and what will the strings attached be, et cetera. So that is where we are with AskWA. I have been sending out updates on the listserv that, for AskWA members, and always please send your questions directly to me too if I can. I often just don't have the answers, but I will always try to get them if I don't, and also let you know if I can't give you an answer because there's too many unknowns at the moment. But again, if the hope is that, were AskWA to disappear from the state-supported side, that members would have options through SpringShare to sort of manage taking on the costs that we had been subsidizing themselves. So that's where we are now, kind of a fuzzy place.
Thanks, Sarah, and thank you for sort of explaining the funding reimbursement process of how that federal money kind of flows through us. All right, I would like to invite Tian to talk a little bit about digitized heritage materials.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tian Triggs. I am the School and Digital Support Librarian at the Washington State Library, the newest member of Library Development. I have only been part of this department since last August, 2024. Before that, I worked in Central Library Services, and before that, I worked at the Washington Talking Book and Braille Library. So I have been in 3 out of 4 of the state library programs, and I can tell you that we we can't be a state library without all of us. Like this is very, very hard to see that, you know, us getting our funding for, you know, the federal side, it's too early to say what that changes right now because we only found out yesterday. But knowing that the state budget is still having a huge impact on our state funded colleagues is very it's upsetting because it will definitely change things, and I'm not sure how much we can recover from that, from something that huge. But our digitized heritage materials cover the historical newspapers, and one of our colleagues here, Sean Scholmeyer, she works on that program, but it's not just her. She also has team members on the state side that work with her on the collection and preservation of these materials. And the state budget crisis right now means that the work that she does as a team with them, they're not going to have the full resources and staff that are required to support our state mandate. It's in the RCW Title 27, Chapter 4, that the state library serves as the depository for newspapers published in the state of Washington, and it's a central location for a valuable historical record for scholarly, personal, and commercial reference and circulation. And both federal and state funding support that work. And that's why we can't just lose part of it and expect to go on. And it was already going to be such a huge, just a massive impact if we were going to lose all of it. I can't tell you what will happen with that, but I would urge you to, if you want more information, since not all of our colleagues are in this presentation, to please go to our staff directory, contact them if you need to find out more. We can also get you names of people who can give you more information about our digitization projects, because the other part of it is all the records that we have made available through the Digital Public Library, DPLA of America. And we had several people working on that, the Northwest Digital Heritage, and everything that we do as far as maintaining the history of this region. It's so essential because we're the repository for this, and having to, you know, one of our colleagues had to talk to the University of Washington about possibly taking that on, because when the future was uncertain about whether or not we'd be able to maintain this, and this is something that we have been stewards of for almost 2 decades, knowing that we were going to lose that, that's also a very emotional impact that we feel that, we were the ones responsible for this, and we put in all this work, and we're the ones who provide access to this region to researchers. And so I can't tell you right now what all this news about the federal funding, what any of it means, but we will try our best to keep everybody updated on this. Check in with us often if you need the names of people. Like I said, we can put I can see Sarah, thank you for putting the staff directory link on there. Find us, talk to us.
Tian, we just have a quick question in chat that's specific to what you just said. Are these the materials that genealogy resources like Ancestry access?
No, they can be used for for genealogy research, but Ancestry is a different program. So.
Thanks so much, Tian. We're going to go back to Jean to talk about our support for rural and tribal libraries.
Hello again. So part of my position, along with my team, is we directly support through consulting services our rural, small tribal libraries. But within our team, we also have folks who help maintain small libraries' websites. We host those websites. We provide technical support. Evelyn Lindbergh does training to help those small libraries maintain their content on those websites. So that is in jeopardy. We also had quite a few libraries across the state who were taking part in the LibTech program, which supplied broadband equipment and internet access. That also included a consultant who would file E-rate on behalf of the LibTech libraries. So losing that is huge for the libraries who are already up and running on that, because all of that equipment has to be pulled out, and then they have to find their own way to have internet connectivity in their libraries. So that is going to be a major impact to small libraries. Another thing that we do, like for the work that I do for both rural libraries and tribal libraries, is we all provide almost like reference services to library staff across the state. So when I work with libraries, public libraries, I deal with questions and consulting for policy development, statutory regulations for libraries, requirements for annexations, contracting, public works, open meetings, risk management. So there's a lot that goes on with just direct help to people who call or email with questions. I also do board training. We've done facilitated discussions for boards and helping with strategic planning. With tribal libraries, provide the same type of service, though tribal libraries they're part of sovereign nations, so it's a bit different. But one of the big things that we've been working with tribal libraries on is grants to get them upgraded to an ILS that will support SIP2 protocols, so that they can take advantage of LinkedIn Learning and other resources that require SIP authentication. So we have tribal libraries out there that are currently upgrading to Koha so that they can take advantage of all these services and provide public catalogs. All of that is at risk. So I think that's what I have to say, Brianna. Let me check. Oh, check out Washington. I do want to take a second to mention that, because the Discover Pass program that we've been managing for several years, we work with the Washington Parks Department to manage that program. And I'll be meeting with them today to see how they might take over full administration of that. But that is funded through the legislature, so I expect that program will continue. It just may not be through the state library.
Thanks, Jean. And also with tribal libraries, they have also other grants. Oh, they also have federal grants that are in jeopardy as well.
Yes, most of the tribal libraries function in whole or in part through the Native American Library Services basic grants. They all have received termination letters as well. There are also what are called enhancement grants through IMLS. So we have quite a few tribal libraries throughout the state who have used those grants, and they're up to $150,000 to do language and cultural programs to save their languages and spread their languages and educate students with their languages. So all of those grants have been terminated.
So another thing that the state library also offers that my colleagues have already mentioned is training. We offer extensive training for librarians, for staff, for directors, boards, like Jean said, through our library development staff. We also do a lot of connecting with subject matter experts to bring in world-class trainers to do training for everyone. And we also support references like OCLC's Web Junction and recorded trainings that are available on the Niche Academy platform, which, depending on this federal funding, we were preparing to shut niche down, which is why at the beginning of this program, I told you that this recording would be available on our YouTube channel. So we're still, again, we don't have all the answers today, unfortunately. And that's one of the questions out there, is what's going to happen with Niche Academy. To talk a little bit about more in-depth training, specifically some youth services, I would love to welcome Sarah White.
Hello, everybody. Sorry, I haven't talked very much today. My name is Sarah White, and I am the Youth Services Consultant at the Washington State Library. I work with Tian pretty closely, but my main purpose is to serve the people in Washington libraries who work with youth and families. And that means a lot of different things. So I'm just going to go through some of them. Is there a slide, Brianna, that is next?
It's just, I think it's just this one.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Consulting.
So I do a variety of projects that support youth and families. So one of the main things that I do is bring youth services related trainings to Washington State Libraries. So I do training myself. So I'm a youth services librarian. So I've been able to do some trainings for library staff. And then I also hire trainers to do trainings for library staff. So that's been a combination of virtual trainings, a lot of cohort model trainings, where it's not just like a 1 hour webinar, but we actually go through like a curriculum together. And then I've also brought some in-person trainings around the state. Some examples of that are, we had someone from the librarian for the United States Marine Band come and travel around Washington doing a workshop about using more inclusive music in story time. We've also hired Adam Davis from Game to Grow to do tabletop role-playing game trainings about facilitating intentional games in libraries. So training is a thing that will go away if we are gone. I also facilitate grant cycles. So I use some of our federal funding to pass money down to libraries for projects, usually competitively. So usually there will be like a competitive grant project. For example, right now, I am sort of half implementing a teen internship grant program where we selected 5 libraries to each receive $5,000 to hire and pay a teen intern for the summer 2025. And paired with that, we've been going through a community of practice kind of training program with them to build connected learning skills and mentorship skills. So right now, that is still uncertain whether that will be funded. And we've also done grants to fund tabletop role-playing game projects. That's been a big one for us this year and last year. Right now, those are all paused. We had some people working on innovation grants. We had just awarded new innovation grants for people to spend up to $2,000 to do grant funded tabletop role-playing game projects. And those are all paused as of right now. Another thing that we do is support school libraries. So we, as far as we know, are the biggest supporter of school libraries in the state. We are a clock hours provider. If you don't know, school teachers have to get recertified. And in order to be recertified, you have to do a certain number of training hours, and they have to be through approved clock hours facilitators. So the Washington State Library is a clock hour provider. So we are, as far as I know, the only people in the state creating school library specific opportunities. We do that all for free, so teachers don't have to pay for their clock hours. Tien does a lot of work on that. That will go away. Every year we do a like 1-day mini conference for school libraries where we do a training day that is specifically all school library focused, which is clock hours eligible. Another thing that I do a lot of is I'm also a participant in a lot of non-grants to states IMLS grants. So there's grants to states, which funds our department, but then there's like leadership grants that are also IMLS funded. And I often serve as a partner and facilitator for those special projects. So if you've heard of or participated in projects like Transforming Teen Services or Building Equity, now called Building Community-Based Summers, or Project Ready Now, those are all IMLS funded projects that I have been a partner and facilitator for that also benefit Washington libraries. I think there have been Washington libraries that have benefited from all three of those. Those have all received cancellation notices as well. And then I also just do a lot of like consulting and connecting. I have a monthly meeting called the Youth Services Critical Conversations Club, where any youth services interested or focused person in the state can come and just chat with each other and like share ideas and ask each other questions. I also do a lot of site visits, so I just get to know everybody in the state and understand what all of your needs and skills are and be able to connect you with each other. And one thing I just like really want to emphasize, we've been talking a lot about all these projects that we fund and like people we pay. And I just think it's really important to remember that all of us, like all of the staff members who work for library development, are, if we go away, I think just our time and our the work we do in our salaried day that isn't just funding grants or paying presenters will be a huge loss. We take a lot of time to build relationships with all of you. We think you're all amazing and cool, and we want to know all the cool things you do and connect you with each other. And that sort of hub will go away if we are all gone. I don't want to minimize just ourselves and the immense amount of knowledge and skill we have between us, because we're not at a desk like you all are. We're librarians for librarians. And if we stay, I encourage you all to take advantage of us and our knowledge and time. Did I forget anything? Oh yes, one last thing that I forgot is we also circulate STEAM kits to schools and libraries. So we have like robotics kits, and we use federal funding to ship them around, so you don't have to pay for the kit or for sending them around the state. And those have been very well loved, and those will also not exist if we don't have federal funding to support them.
Sarah, I think you really nailed it by saying we're librarians for librarians. I think that's it.
It also reminded me of just the networking piece of like our different distribution email lists. Even that is like something that we pay for that software via federal funds, and even that is in danger.
Yeah, it's a real big onion, folks. Like we keep peeling back layers and finding that things are so much more interconnected than we thought. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was really great to go over that, and especially to remind us, because I think we forget on staff too that we're more than the projects. So at this time, I would like to invite Joyce to talk about workforce development and how that's going to be affected.
Thank you so much, Brianna. My name is Joyce Abbott. I am your workforce development librarian here at the State Library. I work on digital equity, adult basic education, digital upskilling and reskilling, and workforce development. So yes, again, libraries are my customers to provide with software for their PCs, their staff PCs, their patron PCs. I provide support on LinkedIn and North Star, and certification exams, free certification exams for anyone who lives, works, or attends school in Washington. I also serve on the Digital Equity Forum's Data and Measurement Work Group, where my role is to showcase library data and services and their impact to the legislature to make sure that libraries the library voice is there when there is opportunity for funding and recommendations for funding. This role is 30% state and 70% IMLS funded. So this state funding comes out of a separate budget provided by the legislature specifically for digital equity. And this digital equity funding and the library capital grants that come from Commerce, those are the only direct state funding to libraries. They're the only direct funding to libraries, in Washington. So you are still going to have, if IMLS were to go away, you will still have access to LinkedIn Learning and North Star Foundational Digital Skills platform and free certification exams for your patrons. But I do want to give the caveat that the restoration of IMLS funding that we just got 15 minutes ago, it's not a long-term save for any of our services because of what's happening. The entire situation is a huge. Everything influences everything else. I think like Tian said earlier, we're all one team. So you can't just parse out one half of the team that's federal and one half the team that's state. Everything is going to be affected. So the certifications that we offer, free certification exams for anyone who lives, works, or attends school in Washington, most of them are taking a pause this summer so that we can complete a project to automate much of that process for your patrons. That will mean that you will be able to offer them this service with little to no staff work on your end, which hopefully will make this resource available and sustainable for Washingtonians for years to come, even if IMLS funding goes away, because we don't know how certain the IMLS funding is under the circumstances, and things change every day, and like yesterday, sometimes several times a day. But it's very, like we have on the slide here, the funding will affect, my ability to do pilot projects that I want to do. Like I want to do a pilot project for VR training for skilled trades. I want to do a pilot project to test out JobScan, but like a library version of JobScan. JobScan is a company that helps people create resumes specifically for a specific job and that specific candidate management system. And we talked with them about making the product more friendly for libraries, and they are willing to do it, and it's great, but we can't spend any funding on that if we're also trying to hold the rest of the library together. So this funding is only for digital equity, but again, everything is connected. So any issues at the state level affect this team, and any issues at the federal level affect the state side too. And I will end with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Joyce. That's a very good reminder again of how things are so interconnected and that one affects the other and vice versa. At this time, I want to send it back to Tien to talk about our wonderful institutional library services and our Washington Talking Book and Braille Library. And Watauble folks, if you're in the audience, I'm sorry I have a typo in your acronym that I forgot to fix, but I got it right on the other ones. So Tien.
So I'm going to talk about two other programs that are part of the state library team, one of which Watauble I worked at. It was actually the first library I worked at when I moved to Washington, and still holds a special place in my heart. But let me tell you about one of the things about us being librarians for librarians, but also librarians that serve all of Washington state. Institutional library services in Watauble, they serve the most vulnerable among us, the most underserved. They are so essential. And there are positions in both those programs that are federally funded because there was a time when federal funding was the most stable source, and we can't even say that anymore. And so when IMLS funding was wiped out, those essential positions and services were just in danger of being gone and really just crippling both programs. But first, I'll talk about I am um, the Institutional Library Services Program, which Laura Sherbo provided me this information because it's the one program I have not worked in. But Washington State Library's branches at Eastern State Hospital and Western State Hospital have been in existence for 60 years. And the funding affects the larger issue of how all the branches of ILS can continue their work and services. They need both state and federal funding. The full range of library services provided on site to patients and staff is an integral part of the Department of Social and Health Services, their goal of patient treatment and recovery. And one of the ways that funding has supported programs at ILS is, for example, the purchase of supplies and prizes for Echo Glen Children's Center summer reading program that was provided by the services consultant in ILS. And then the IMLS leadership grant that supports the prison library's performance initiative was actually originally terminated on April 8th. And there's uncertainty about how the changing news about federal funding will have the impact that it will have on this and other grants right now. The primary objective of that grant was to address the disparities in service models among general service libraries and U.S. state and territorial prisons. And it's been a collaborative project between the Washington State Library and the Washington State Department of Corrections. And that grant would bring stakeholders together to identify and discuss standards, policies, best practices, and outcomes for prison libraries. Also develop adaptable models for providing those services and create an online workspace for collaborative activities. You know, this is innovative work that all of us do and what these programs do. And then, you know, Washington Talking Book and Braille Library, they are just such an amazing program because the library services that they provide statewide, um, it's free to all Washington state residents who qualify for the service. And what that means is any Washington resident who is unable to read standard print material. It could be due to blindness or other visual impairments, physical disabilities, meaning that, you know, there's something that prevents someone from being able to hold a book or to turn the pages, deaf blindness, and also reading disability. And that one I want to highlight because when I started at Washington Talking Book and Braille Library, that wasn't necessarily uh, serving that population of people who had reading disabilities. That was not something that was offered. It was in the process. And as a former educator, seeing that, it really speaks to me because you want to be able to serve the children, the students in all ways possible, and not having that available and trying to find the resources for the students who needed that was always something that teachers had to keep in mind. How do I afford to bring these audiobooks in for the students who need it? How do I afford to serve these students? And now they can. Schools can become institutional, like, patrons of Washington Talking Book and Braille Library. If you serve a population of people who would be, you know, could take advantage of that, you could apply and get those audiobook players, those sent to you for free. And I always bring this up because I want every school to be involved with this. And you know, I'm always going to support these programs because, like I said, these serve the communities that sometimes are invisible, and we shouldn't we shouldn't forget that when we mean to serve everybody, we really do mean everybody in Washington State, and all of our programs do that, and we do that together. We're very collaborative. All 4 programs at the state library and all the funding, state or federal, supports all of us. All right, I'm getting off my soapbox.
Thank you so much, Tian. And thank you to everyone who outlined all of our programs and talked about them so well and really explained them very well. So we've talked a little bit about the federal funding and what it supports, and I want to bring up what the impact on staff will be with that federal funding. So federal funding supports 32 partially or fully funded library development staff, staff at Watauble, and the ILS staff as well. So without that federal funding, like I said, we all got those letters last week about our jobs being at risk because of that funding being cut. Once again, these are the projects and the programs that are at risk with the federal funding cut: eBooks, fewer resources, rural libraries at risk, prison and hospital libraries, staff cuts, and all of those really amazing, innovative projects that we are so excited about are in jeopardy with losing that federal funding. So what's the latest? There's been some developments over the last week, last day, last, I don't know, hour. It's changing so fast. There's been a few lawsuits that you may have seen. So on April 4th, Washington became one of 21 states that was suing Trump to protect libraries, museums, and other small agency programs. I listed all the other states that we joined there. Some of our friends in Wisconsin, in Oregon, in California, Colorado. So we did join in that lawsuit. Washington State Librarian Sarah Jones joined Secretary of State Hobbs, WLA Executive Director Ainsley Novara, and several public and academic library leaders in a letter to Congress asking for attention to this matter. And then on April 7th, the American Library Association and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, which is the largest union representing museum and library workers, are also challenging Trump's administration's gutting of IMLS. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of ALA and AFSCME by Democracy Forward and co-counsel Garagalo Eberhard LLP, and asks to block the dismantling of IMLS. On April 10th, a preliminary injunction to stop the dismantling of IMLS was also filed. And that lawsuit that I mentioned that Washington was a part of, which is Rhode Island v. Trump, the hearing for that was held on April 18th. As of today, at least as of what I know right this moment, there has not been a decision in that case. The ALA versus Trump case was heard in DC District Court on April 30th. And on May 1st, that district court judge granted a short-term emergency order blocking the Trump administration's efforts to dismantle the independent agency. U.S. District Court Judge Richard Leon said that the Institute of Museum and Library Services had met the high bar for a temporary restraining order, saying that the administration's unilateral efforts to shutter the agency contravenes Congress and was likely to have permanent effects a court couldn't reverse. So this temporary or short-term blocking order is going to give courts time to decide if the preliminary injunction that they requested can be issued. So now what? So even though we're still in federal fiscal year 25, budget discussions at the federal level for FY26 have already begun. The White House did release a preliminary budget draft, I think last week, that included eliminating IMLS and the NEA and the NEH. The first Trump administration also did this in his budget draft proposals. So what that means is ALA is now campaigning for members of Congress to sign the Dear Appropriator letters, because IMLS funding is an appropriated funding through Congress. Dear Appropriator letters urge members of the Appropriations Committee to support funding for specific programs like libraries and IMLS. And the best way for any Congress member to demonstrate their support and commitment to library funding is to sign on to those letters in support. These letters actually close really soon, I think in the next few days or next week, said mid-May. So action really is needed now. As the courts deliberate on the administration's attempts to eliminate the agency, it's critical that Congress include funding for this agency through the Library Services and Technologies Act, or LSTA. Otherwise, IMLS won't be able to operate, regardless of the outcome of these court cases. For school libraries, Innovative Approaches to Literacy, which is the IAL, provides needed resources for addressing literacy. Similarly, while courts debate the future of the Department of Education, it's vital that Congress continue to fund the IAL. ALA has some really great resources that you can use for advocacy and those Dear Appropriator letters. Okay, we have a few minutes left, and I know we have some folks on our team that were answering questions in chat, so thank you so much for that. But are there questions that we want to answer verbally?
Hello,
There-
Joyce, do you
oh,
want to
sorry.
take lead?
No,
Joyce.
No, you go for it. Okay,
Okay.
all right.
So,
All right. No, you go.
The first question, I'm just going to read these out loud and then someone. I think we've kind of addressed this, but can you speak to the complexity of navigating both the federal actions and state budget deficit? I mean, I think the answer is we need both to function fully, and both are bad. Does anyone have anything else they want to add about that?
Yeah, I think that really does kind of sum it up. Unfortunately, like I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we just received the state budget. I think it came out last week, and the team members that are much higher on the food chain than us have been making decisions and talking about options, and we don't know what that's going to do yet. We're still working through that. And again, with the federal funding, I think there's, what is there, like 80 staff members total for throughout over the 4 programs, and almost half of them are federally funded. So you figure the other half are pretty much state funded. So it's neither side is great. Like Sarah said, it's both bad. So we're still figuring out what that all means.
Okay, next question is the Washington State Library aware of any response by IMLS to the congressional request for answers that was due on May 1st? In that, they asked what factors were used to determine the cancellation of grants, including grants to states funding, and also asked what the updated priorities are.
That's a really good question, and I don't think that we have heard anything. I know we sent some requests to Sonderling specific. We did, Washington did, and haven't heard back from him. So I don't know if there's been any movement, and I don't think anybody else does either, unfortunately. I really hate just saying I don't know to all these questions. I really hate that, but it really is the truth. We don't know. We were preparing for this presentation when we heard about the reinstatement of the grant literally yesterday afternoon. So things are changing that quickly.
Yeah, I think that we could say every day has been a roller coaster. Lots of up and downs, lots of new information all the time, and it takes time to process what that means. And, you know, luckily we have other people working on that. We're just moving forward, trying to just do our daily work. But it is hard when you get news at the end of the day and you have to go home and try and figure it out because, of course, there are no answers yet. And there may be no answers the following day. But like I said, we will try to do our best to keep everyone updated, send out information through the mailing list as long as we have access to those. I think, Sarah Pate, did you put your WSL updates, so people can sign up for those? Please read through that. Sarah does a great job of getting that information out there.
We're at 10, so I know some people are having to go, but I think we can stick around to keep answering questions, and we are recording this. So if anyone needs to leave, you can pop back on to the recording once we post it. So I think I think we've sort of answered some of these questions, but I'll go through them really quickly. We have the question about how many at the state library have been notified their position will end and how many more are anticipated to be notified if funding is not available. I mean, at this point, we don't really know the full answer to all of that because things keep changing, but it's not good. I think is the thing to keep in mind. It's not good for either the federally or state funded folks. There's going to be a reduction.
We know that April 28th, all of us that were federally, partially or fully funded, received notices of our positions being at risk, which is the first step of the potential layoff process. And then that was prior to the state budget coming out and knowing the extent of the state budget. And so they're working through what that means on the state level in those positions currently.
I want to really quick talk about, someone brought up the community book project really quickly. I'm going to just talk about that. So someone asked about sending books to the state library after the reading program is over. So we at the state library have something called the community book project, which is where if you do like a project where you have like buy 500 copies of the same book because you want your whole city to read the same book, or you have just like book club sets that you don't need anymore, you've historically been able to send them to us and then we will redistribute them out to other libraries that want them for free. I believe, is that a state funded program? I believe it's a state funded program. But yes, that program is very much in jeopardy with all of the funding cuts too. It was a really cool way for people to get extra books for their collection. We especially had a lot of school libraries use it when we had youth books come through, because school library collection budgets are basically non-existent. So it was a cool way to redistribute the wealth. Joyce, do you want to pick another question there?
Sure. I think we addressed how the general public can help. We don't know yet what will be remaining of services for sure, because everything is too up in the air. We get new information all the time. What about E-rate for internet access in rural neighborhoods? Okay, so for that one, Cody Hansen, who is our broadband wizard, he's been keeping up with the E-rate concerns, and he's been working with Lumen to try and keep LibTech libraries online, should that be necessary. This is not set in stone, and with recent funding updates, it's really too soon to tell. So I would direct you to Cody, and I'm going to put his email in the chat.
As far as how you can help, again, the Dare Appropriator letters are out currently. That is the biggest thing. But also, we were talking about this yesterday, especially knowing that we had our grants to states uncanceled or reinstated, whatever you want to say, that potentially, possibly keeps us funded through September. But I think Sarah White, you mentioned this is a really good opportunity now that we might have a little bit more of a runway, so to speak, that our colleagues and our network that we serve can tell our story and how it supports you.
There have been a lot of questions about House Bill 1207, and the answer is we don't know. I mean, we know that it has not been signed, I think, but we don't know if it will be.
We certainly hope it will be.
I think too, even if it's signed, we don't know how it will actually help.
Yeah. It's not going to magically save everything, unfortunately.
I'm looking through to see if there's anything we haven't answered. I did see a question about the Washington State Digital Archives. Does someone know the answer to that question? If our materials overlap with WSDA? Tian, is that a good question for you?
I believe it is just the archives program. So they are the ones, I believe it's Debbie Bond over at Archives who is in charge of the digital part of that. So that shouldn't be affected. So a lot of our state agencies, our librarians there, they send, so how it works is there are EPUBs, which are the digitization of our state publications, which, we are mandated to maintain a state depository collection, and we have had a program in place for a while to digitize a lot of those publications, and we work with agencies throughout Washington State to make sure that we can get those publications, and a lot of them have become digital, and so, or they're born digital, and so the digital archives program is what the state library, the state side, the state funded side in Central Library Services. um, they help to uh, catalog those materials, make sure that they are ingested appropriately into digital archives, and then they are publicly available to anyone to access that. So as far as I know, digital archives should not, for now, be affected, but don't quote me on that because I am not sure. I do know that it's a program that Central Library Services is in charge of, and that will have a huge impact because if the government publications team goes away, that work becomes so much harder to do. It is not a one-person job. It requires a team.
Another thing to know is that archives is also under the Secretary of State. So they are kind of our sibling over on the Capitol campus and other parts of Washington. But I mean, we're the ones facing the biggest budget crisis right now, but that's not to say that other departments won't face similar budget crises. So just keep that in mind that archives is also kind of part of our ecosystem. I think maybe a good question to end on is how are how are we holding up? How are we doing? Not great, Bob. Okay, sorry.
Um, yeah, not great. It's been I think somebody already described it as a roller coaster. That feels like that's the best description. It's a really bad roller coaster, like one of those really rickety old ones that is super scary to be on. So that's how I would describe it. I think the the hardest part about everything is, yes, we're all receiving these notifications that our jobs are at risk, and yes, that's our jobs are important. They are our livelihood. But beyond that, everyone on this team and everyone throughout the state library in our other programs in ILS, in Central Library, in Talking Book and Braille Library, we all genuinely love what we do, and we love being able to serve this community in Washington and to serve these libraries and to serve you. And that is, I think, the hardest part that we're all kind of grappling with. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything before I start crying.
Well, I just want to say that every single time I get to work with my amazing colleagues, no matter which program that they're in, it's I am just so humbled by the passion, the talent, the just the desire to do more with what we do, to do, you know, to innovate, to provide whatever services, whatever we can to the people of Washington State. And, I consider myself so fortunate because I get to work with teacher librarians, with school libraries who, I was a teacher. I know how embattled education has been for decades. And now to also, see that this on the library side together, I just have no words. I'm angry. To be honest, if you want to know how I'm doing, I'm angry. And people know me. I'm pretty cheerful. Usually I smile a lot. I love, like, interacting with people, but I am just so angry at feeling like I've been hobbled in my ability to do my job and to do it well and to serve the people I want to serve. And I'm also going to get emotional because I love these people and I love you guys. So,
It really is, it's grief. That's the best way to describe it. Like we are all going through the 5 stages of grief, and grief is not linear, and we go back and forth between different stages. I think Joyce, I think you and I talked about this, and you had said like we all have one foot firmly set in bargaining. Like we're all have one foot there, and then the other foot goes between anger and denial and all of the others. So
Yeah, it's hard. I'm usually a very like efficient and productive human, and it's really hard to be efficient and productive when you don't have any stability. Like it's this is not an efficient thing to do to us.
no, it's
Speaking of
it's it's
efficiency,
chaos. Yeah, speaking of
I mean,
efficiency,
like
um,
we can't do our jobs fully, and yet we are in them, and it just feels like this weird purgatory, and I don't
mhm.
love that. It's challenging.
It's purgatory and chaos at the same time, which again, like I'll just say, when we did this at WLA, like we were literally changing the program the week before because things had changed. And when we were getting ready to do this for you this morning, we literally had to redo slides yesterday because things had changed. So it is this weird chaos. But thank you to whoever asked that. I appreciate you asking. But I think what we'll do is we will end on a couple things here, some information. This QR code directly links to our library development contact info, which I believe Sarah P. put in the chat earlier. Sarah Jones is our state librarian. She's always happy to be contacted. She's a little busy right now, but you're welcome to contact her. The next slide, we have been compiling a LibGuide, which talks about all of our federally funded programs and what's affected. We've been trying to keep up with all of the news stories of IMLS that's in the news. So we've been keeping a running tally of that. That LibGuide apparently needs to be updated. So you're welcome to go there, and that really has a lot of detailed information about the programs that we talked about already today. And then I just want to thank you all for being here this morning. Once again, this session will be recorded. It will be available especially on the State Library's YouTube channel. It might be on Niche Academy. I don't know yet. Definitely YouTube, and I will send that link to you all when it is available. I just want to also take a minute to thank my team that was here today to present the information. As we said, it's been very emotional, and this is a lot of labor and emotion that I asked you to do this morning to present this. So it has been truly been an honor working with this team, and really the honor of my life serving you in your libraries. So thank you and have a great day.